Today, I was invited as a guest by Fred Hughes, the local historian, to the launch and book signing of his new book, The Story of a City. This book was launched to celebrate the centenary of the city, and it's a civic history, along with a lot of great storytelling. I think pretty much everybody knows who Fred Hughes is. He is not just a local historian, he is the Stoke-on-Trent historian. Anything that he doesn't know about the city is really not worth knowing. And Fred is one of the reasons that I became a historian of the city, is because his passion, his knowledge, and his way of storytelling always fascinated me. I'm pretty sure at this point I have read all of Fred's books. And I've also been good friends with him now for many years, and he is a huge supporter of what I do. So it was wonderful to go along today and listen to him speak. But what I've done is I have recorded his speech because I also wanted everybody else, all of my followers and all the people who couldn't make it there today, I wanted them to hear what he had to say. And you can purchase this book from Beowulf, from Gladstone. It's called Stoke-on-Trent, The Story of a City, 1925 to 2025. And I absolutely cannot wait to read it. I've got it sat here on my desk, signed by Fred, personalised to me, and I'm going to absolutely treasure it. So that's enough for me. I'm sorry that the sound quality isn't fantastic, but it was recorded on my phone. But it's not the quality of the recording that we're listening to, it's the words. So this is Fred Hughes at the launch of his book, The Story of a City, and it was recorded in Stoke Minster on the 9th of December 2025. Enjoy, guys.
Well, listening to the introductions has quite humbled me. Writers are very much lonely people, believe it or not, and hardly ever used to getting plaudits and thanks. Even from people who counsel you and beg you sometimes to write or to deliver. It becomes a job. So thanks. Can I just thank one or two others as well while I'm here? Nobody's yet thanked James, and James has been almost director of the whole, all the way through the publication of this book, and some of the difficult bits in what to use and what not to use. But he's been remarkable in organising all of this 100 years centenary event. It is really one event. I'd like also to thank the Liz for all of their contribution in the making of the book, and certainly others will agree with me and go along with the fact, and some people will say how much she has given of her life in this last 12 months to deliver what I think is an extraordinary and most remarkable event. Jane Wood, of course, you've already met and introduced her. She has always my love and thanks. I have great respect for her and for her family too. Amanda, of course, is a treasure. She's been with me for, as she says, 25 years. I think it's a bit longer than that, but there you go. And we've spent certainly 25 years in person, drawing a lot of history together and looking to the future and making things happen. And believe it or not, Amanda is so brilliant at doing that. One of the best people that you can look at and emulate and say, yes, it's rather wonderful, and she is rather wonderful. So thank you, Amanda. And then I want to thank, because there's many others that have contributed really to the publication. Ray isn't here, is Ray Johnson? must give Ray my real big thanks, because Ray is everywhere. You talk about people being part of the city. Ray really is the city. He's the image of the city. You can't go anywhere without either hearing from Ray Johnson, bumping into Ray Johnson, seeing Ray Johnson, looking at the wrong end of the camera to Ray Johnson. and his contribution, not just to the book anyway, but to life in the Potteries. And we love him to bits. And I think local media too. The media has helped to promote history. Certainly, we talk about over the last 20, 30 years, but people that have set the scene before, people like John Aberley, who's talked to the people, the great news writer, and more importantly, columnist for the historic columnist for the Central for many, many years, a man that we all miss. And in earlier times, people like Sam Planck, his focal radio was almost dedicated to local history. Yes, he played his music, and it was good, fire off, whatever you like, whatever turns you on. But his history pieces were very reminiscent of what Stoke-on-Trent used to be like, and what it got facing in for the future. And of course, Radio Stoke. We really can't do anything without Radio Stoke. It's the voice of the people, and in many ways I feel sad that it's been, I guess it's been sort of downgraded somewhat. I very much believe in local radio, and for many, many years, Radio Stoke has been the voice of Stoke-on-Trent, and some of the work there, and Paul is here this morning, I can see it, and welcome to you, Paula. We've had so much good times together talking about nostalgic things and reminiscing. But two other people I really want to mention, and they're both here as my guests. Steve Burks, who's sitting on the end there next to dear Joan. Steve's seminal website, thepotteries.org, continues to inform and inspire nationally and internationally subscribers and researchers who are interested in the city's Stoke-on-Trent's richness of its heritage. Steve has long before many have thought about logging and stuff like that on the internet. Such remarkable things in his website. I don't think there can't be anybody in this room that hasn't visited thepotteries.org. If not, go have a look. So thank you, Stephen. Thank you for coming. And lastly, I want to look to the future and thank Jenna Goodwin. She's going to take over much of the mantle. She's already making marvellous moves, positive moves, not just in narrative of reminiscence and history and local history. She believes very, very much as I do in the depth and the heart of Stoke-on-Trent and North Staffordshire, and she's building on that. She's doing stuff now that is modern. It's for the new historian and the new person who likes history, local history. And if I'm handing a mantle over to anybody, I can't think of anybody better than Jenna Goodwin. Thank you also for coming, Jenna.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the book. It's been an interesting passage of time, but some things I ought to caution about first, though. I'll remind you, if you don't know him, of a chap named Arnold Bennett. Does anybody have we all heard of Arnold Bennett?
I think so, yes.
Yeah. Well, he's the chap that, if you're Fentonian, does regret, because he's the one that deliberately left Fenton out of the 6th term. And of course, he has to face the consequences for that. But I remember over the years that having done quite a bit of research on Bennett Society. Love him. I love his books. My number one fiction writer. You read books like Clayhanger and Dale Wives Tale and Anna of the Five Towns. They just, you are where you are in reading the books. When I first came to work in Burslem in 1960, I didn't need one of these geographer road maps to tell me which street was which street. I just read the old Wives Tale, and that got me around marvellously. I met all the characters, they were still living. The outer work, the inner cleaner, they're all there, And Arthur Barry took those leaves out of those pages too, in his monologues. Wonderful to read that. I'm sure we've done that. The thing about Arnold Bennett, of course, is I remember reading the famous bits where he was asked to give a speech, an introductory speech at a do that he was attending. And he stood up, gesturing to people, thank you. And almost instantly, everybody waited for him to start his speech. He reached into his top pocket and he pulled out his pen and held it aloft and said, I don't do talking. My pen talks for me. And sat down. That fascinated me. I actually discovered where that came from. It was his induction into the what do they call it? The festival of killing a deer and celebrating it, the Hanley, the Animal Association from Control.
Oh, the Venison Festival.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Say it again.
The Venison Festival
in
Hanley.
Imagine that. It was a gift from the Duke of Sutherland annually to the good citizens of Hanley, to say, thank you very much for what you're doing, etc. Kill the animal for you and go and roast it and eat it. And they did this, and they still do it. Every year, they don't do it anything bit. But it was at one of these festivals that Arnold Bennett was inducted. Instead, I found the reference to it, dug it out of the reference library somewhere, and there it is. It actually reported this pen incident. Now, I mention this because I can talk. Bennett said he couldn't, but he couldn't. He didn't like talking. But I can talk because, well, that's been part of my stand over the last 50 odd years. But I'm very difficult these days in writing. These very neuropathic nuisances that we get with age, So bear with me. If you want me to sign your books, I will, and it just takes a little bit longer than normal. So just and I do welcome selfies. So the book, as James said, it's been a team exercise, but it's something that I'd always wanted to finish. I mean, I've been writing it for years. 20 odd years now, working for the Sentinel, and the goodwill that I was shown by the Sentinel staff, Martin Veer, of course, the last editor of the Sentinel. That's an achievement, that's a record. That's something that the students will tell us about in years to come. Who was the last editor of the Sentinel? Martin tells what he is. But the editors before him, of course, always had the idea that I could write and put colour to things that I was writing about. And all of this sort of contributed to the way I wanted to go. So my first book was about Burslem, mother town. And from then on, we had a great relationship, the city council and I got these variety of commissions the life of Barnett Ross, and the 30-year history of the miners' strike. All these things which so much affected Stoke-on-Trent and so much affected the way that, we came to judge ourselves. So this book was always there, but the difficulty of writing a book like that is you do tend to fall into academia, and that's the difficult part, because people don't like that. Okay, we've got academics here, I'm sure we are this morning, but there are a majority of people are, ordinary people who love Stoke-on-Trent. They work here, they live here, they bring their families up here. They cross boundaries from Tunstall to Longton. Everybody knows everybody else. It's a magic place, really. How to tell that story without the academics to the people is the difficult thing. And this is where the Sentinel and Radio Stoke very much helped in that sort of level of trying to sort of say, this is the balance I want to achieve. And when I've done it, then I know that I'm handing it over, and I know that people say, oh look, it's so-and-so. It's bringing the characters alive. Right from the time when we often quoted, I often quoted, Fred Hughes, the man who actually made, it was his policy, it was his draft commission that brought the whole thing together to make a federation in 1910. It was he that made it work. He, a mayor of Stoke, he really the big man of Stoke in the late Victorian Edwardian times. A man who stood at the leader's position, holding a portfolio of all the economy and how money was spent in Stoke-on-Trent on those first occasions of 1910, probably 1911, 12, 13, made him the second mayor after Cecil Wedgwood. And to bring him alive, really, to his death, accused he was of diverting money from one objective policy to something that he favoured, all to do with this church yard, all to do with this church itself. So, I thought, how do you tell that? Well, there's no way of telling it, because you have to tell the bad as well as the good. And it was never proven whether Fred had actually done this dirty deed. But it was there. And his councillors, his opposition councillors, stood as they still do, and they point the finger, and they make the accusation, and they did to Fred. And he stood up in response. And you can imagine him there with his high wing colours, and, his dog suit, furious, angry that he's been accused of something which he thought he hadn't done, or was going to prove that he hadn't done, raised his hands to answer these people, and dropped down dead. There. And that seat that the leader sits at, in front of you, Lord Mayor. No connection at all. But that's the kind of story I think is worth telling. And the event itself, when the King George V came to Stoke-on-Trent, there's a nice little chapter on this. Actually, the book actually starts with this, and you can imagine, this big occasion, and it all took place in the North Stafford Auditorium. They weren't ready yet. They hadn't got a town hall fit to have, to start to accommodate 80 odd councillors with a new councillor. That's how many there were in those days, 80 odd, imagine. So they hadn't got this council. So they had it in the ballroom at the North Stafford Hotel. And that was undergoing at the time a new development itself. The hotels do, and they just had a new swing door, swivel door fitted. Didn't last, but there it was. for that time. And that's where they sort of had that first meeting. And you can imagine like this, all the great and all the good and all the people that came, and everybody thought, who's going to be the new mayor? The first mayor, of course, it had to be Cecil Wedgwood. And he was the chair of the organising committee that got the whole thing working anyway. He took it to government. He was the main witness for the Federation. Everybody spoke highly of him. He owned the best and biggest factory in Stoke-on-Trent anyway. Maybe not the biggest, but certainly the most internationally renowned factory in Stoke-on-Trent, which his great-grandfather had built it to Truro. And when they spoke about him to introduce him, the promoters spoke highly of him. Went on for an hour. And everybody thought, well, that's it, now we can, it's going to be nodded through, and we'll all go for something to eat. And then that's it. We can all go home and let them get on with the business. Until somebody from out of the blue suddenly said, pop that man from Blues, I think it was actually, suddenly stand up and said, well, I think we should have Fred Hughes should be the Lord Mayor, the mayor, not the Lord Mayor, the mayor. And so there was a contest, which went on for something like 4 hours. And Cecil won it, but only with 12 votes. So never predict about who's who and what's what, and sometimes where is where. He had his, and James mentioned this in his introduction, he had his first service here. That's the man making of the introductory. So it's in this church, in this room, as it is today. Nothing's changed. It is as it was. Imagine this, 1910. And he spoke about that figure. You can have a look around if you want to turn this there anyway. It's the plaque of Josiah Wedgwood, the great man himself. And in the book, there's this letter that he wrote to his mum, because his dad had died, and talking about how much he was going to do for Stoke-on-Trent, how much love he'd got for his city, for his borough, new borough. And he talked about standing in front of that plaque, as he does now. So we mean, this is history happening. History in the making. So that's the way I planned the book. There are things in it that really ought to be told, things that we should be proud of. One of the great things about Stoke-on-Trent is that it's art and it's culture and it's crafts. But the thing is, we don't know that we're all artists. We don't recognise the fact that we are these people that we're talking about. People from the outside look at us and say, I'm certainly older than many generations. They must all be talented. And they were talented. Your mums and dads, your grandmothers, your great-grandmothers, they were there diligently painting figures on cups and saucers, freehand. And the whole industry, came from that ground, that plot. So we've got to tell that story. And in that story, it's something that we continue to do. So we've developed art and craft, but we want that cultural thing. We want to spread that. So there's this remarkable thing way back when people like Peter Cheeseman brought in the New Vic Theatre in a little old cinema. And is there anybody, I don't doubt it, looking around? I mean, I'm getting on a bit, but I remember those early days. I remember those early days when, jazz nights on a weekend, and you'd sit in there, beer would be out, and it would be great things like that. And then this big move to Harts Hill, in between Stoke and Newcastle. And I think that needs to be met. So I spent a little bit of time on that. How do you tell that story? will you tell it with a bit of humour, hopefully? And there's a chapter called 6 into 1, which was a play that Peter had devised, and he'd performed at the, wrote and performed at the Old Vic, and it was about the Federation. Now, I've had to quote in the book the Guardian's chief correspondent in arts and culture, who came to see it. And if I've quoted part of it, but if there was ever a play that was ever blasted, then it was 6 into 1. And because it's all about how they made music out of it, I don't know. But it was all about arguing about who's going to pay for the electric bills when we lose our electric sources? What about our gas? Who's going to sort the water out? These things in the play, remarkable stuff. So you've got to tell a story of art through that humour, because I think Peter Cheeseman had a sense of humour. But Stoke-on-Trent, Newcastle on the line, you'll have to say that, and the county, had a great input in that, still does, in its financing. And that's something that, ought to go into a history book. And then I thought another thing that should go into it is, in the Federation itself, about the Sutherlands. You can't ignore the fact that, in a way, part of the scaffolding and structure of Stoke-on-Trent started, from post-Anglo-Saxon time into the Norman period. You get these people who become very, very rich for all sorts of stuff. The Sutherlands then reached a point where they were a bit upset about all the pollution that was going into the River Trent. Now, I've followed the Trent, as John Hadley did, and I've written quite a bit about the parts of it. But you only really get a sense of the Trent itself. Is it Trent Bay? And then, particularly as it goes across, meets up with the Lion Barrow part, and then they go into the Trent as it goes through Trenton Gardens, and that's where, of course, the Sutherlands' house was, Trenton. So they had a lot to say, and they got an extra guy. So they were very pro-Federation, because they'd been fighting Fenton, Urban District Council, for many years and losing, attacking them for polluting the Trent. And for some reason, I don't know, I didn't find the source of this, but Fenton always won. Fenton always does something. Look at it today. It's a remarkable place. It's just, it's bells and streamers and everything, that wonderful, wonderful town hall with that garden in front of it. I think, of all our towns, I love Fenton. I love to go there and it's a joyous place. But they win. They always win. They beat Arnold Bennett as well when he was talking about, the 5 towns rather than 6 towns. The devil is in the potteries. A famous one. Have a look on, it tells a story on Steve's website. The devil in the potteries, where the reverend, had a go at Arnold Bennett, and Bennett came back. It's dazzling proportions. Lives in the papers in London. So you have to have that story. Because in a way, the Dukes lost. I mean, the last two, Cromarty and Millicent, the Duchess, became quite famous nationally and internationally. They had a lot to do. Certainly Millicent did in the part that were looking after people during the Great War, the First World War. She was nursing, she organised nursing, he organised all sorts of things as well. And of course, it's to lose Trenton at that time, to see the humour in the fact that nobody wanted it. How curious is that? Nobody wanted Trenton. We want Trenton, of course. Nobody wanted Trenton. He offered it to the county. He offered it to the new, that's why he wanted federation, the new authority. Yeah, they didn't want it. And we take it if we want, but we didn't want it. So eventually he sold it on. It was a remarkable thing, which I talk about in the book, about the sale of the century, where people were buying farms and plots of land. It just shows you. I mean, the books in the archives, there's two big portfolios of sales on the days a week to do, selling off these lands. Just going through all the things that people were taking and buying and bidding for shows you how huge the Trenton family land was. They were, almost reached into Stafford, certainly into Shropshire. That's how much land. And I've enjoyed, some of the things that I've certainly done when I was working at the centre. I had a pleasure once of having high tea on the home of the Dowager, Lord Stafford, Lady Stafford, at this remarkable place, little farm, tea farm, near to, near to where those caves are. Beach caves. And goes to show the farm there, right next to a bigger farm that was owned by a former council. We see chief executive, but he was town clerk. And, the land that he bought on behalf of the council and for himself during that sell, talking 1919 at that time, post that. And you look at that and you think, this land. And that high tea was wonderful. And she treated me royally. She had a maid that came on a lawn, willow trees, I remember it distinctly. And she had a maid with a proper apron, white and black apron, on silver tea on a tray. It's wonderful. But she was a writer. She was a historian, local historian. That's good as well. So we had this thing in common. She built it up from there. We had this conversation, which just went on. So finishing off, because we're coming to the end now, and I wanted to give you a chance to ask a couple of questions. The book, in a way, is my love letter to the city. It captures a lot of the things that I've taken into consideration. It certainly is, although everything I guarantee and promise is accurate. Some people may disagree with my version, but I promise you. I'm not far but to tell you its story, and I think the title of it, which is not mine, it's James's actually, the story of the city, and I think it does that 100 years quite well. It goes a little bit beyond. It tells you how the rivers came and some of the transport links and things like that. It does have a little bit of a political dig at why other authorities don't want to join our authority and make a big unitary authority. But this is not modern stuff, this is old stuff that's been going on now since Federation in 1910. So why worry about that? It's going to happen, whatever. But that's it. So there's my love letter. I trust you will like it. I actually love it. I think I've told it well. And I'm happy that it's been delivered to you like it is now. So I'm concluding now, and I'm leaving time for a couple of questions, if you want to. If not, then I'll sign a few books for you. Thank you. So, we have, yes, my dear. How are you? All right.
Amazing. Over so many years of research and writing, is it possible for you to identify one story or event or piece of history that you learnt about that is the most extraordinary one for you, that you really made a huge impact on you, that you had never known about? Is there one particular thing you can point at?
Wow. I can think of a dozen. But the one, just give me a second. I think really is a feeling of presence, of being part and being in history, of going back pretty much to the beginning. And the place to do that, and still is, and do the things that I probably did then, is to go to the monastery at Abbey Bolton, the ruins of the monastery at Abbey Bolton. Go into that little area and look around. Now, Bill Clemford, a city archaeologist, has written a fabulous book about the origins of the Abbey at Abbey Bolton. Very well worth reading. But I got there on this day, a bit like today, but not as heavy in rain. But it was drizzly quite well, so it was a dull day. It's always a good day to go and look at history. It's a dull day, rainy if possible. Don't work with the sunshine, don't work. Because nobody else is around for a start off. So I stood there in the middle, and I seemed to have been haunted by the monks themselves. Because they started it all. And to have put it there, and in that particular place. And you know why? Because of this place, because of this church. Because, it had, this is an Anglo-Saxon origin church, it has its roots back there. And when the Normans took over, of course, and then the Cistercian monks came to live and worship here and to really conduct local authority business, that's where they chose. Why? Because it's right on the Trent side, and it leads right into here, and here is the dispersal point where you can get to. They were particularly fond of their farmland at Normacott. So it's a great history in Normacott. I love Normacott, great history, church and everything. But the one thing that I did when I got to the monastery this day is, because I knew of them in Bursley, I knew they'd got a grange in Bursley, and I wanted to follow their footpaths, and I did. And you can still follow their footpaths. There are little roads that go through Sneed Green up to the Sneed Arms that nobody knows about, but they're still there. They go through allotments and playgrounds and things like that, but the path's there, and you can still go there. And the thrill of that, to actually follow the monk of the 13th century, the exact way that they did daily to reach their farmland at Burton and Cobridge, the Grange, I thought was a really remarkable and thrilling passage of time. So that's one of them. Pleasure. Yes.
Fred,
Sorry.
you mentioned briefly local government reform, and you say it is going to come, and I share your view on that whatever the individual arguments, I think the government of the day will have its way, and it will arrive. How are we in the city going to preserve our identity and our history and ensure that we don't completely get consumed into the new authority? Because I do think it's vitally important that Stoke-on-Trent retains its individual identity.
There speaks a voice, I think, for all of us. And I think that there's many, it's a wise thing, and you're a wise man. You and I certainly go back many, many years, dealing with similar subjects over a period of time. I don't know, Ross. I'm fairly certain that nothing stays the same, but memory stays the same. So we can't get rid of that. We can't go back into the past, other than, although we try physically, we can do, but you look at Burton, you think about, I think I've written recently, 8 major pottery manufacturers, 8 major pot banks were in Burton town centre. Were 40 years ago. Today, I think, is 1. And I'm not taking into consideration more than pottery, which is close enough. But I think Royal Stafford is the only one. Is it still producing? I think so. I think it's restarted. What's been put in its place? The banks themselves have gone. That energy is gone. So as far as politics is concerned, as far as, we've got to make sure, politically, that when these things happen, we insist on that retention of who we are. And we must never lose, and I don't think we ever will. I think the legacy will continue. I think young people are feeling that there is an interest still. And unfortunately, they haven't got the jobs that we had in way of making things work as far as art is concerned, art and culture is. But it's a big, big question. It's going to be difficult to get through it, but I think in the end we will. I think simply for the sake of they'll try as much as they want, politicians, maybe not us, to get rid and do down and dumb down art and culture, but they won't. They will never ever because that will always survive and always thrive. So I think some reassurance there. Wish I could be around travelling.
Yes.
With you.
We'll make it.
Martin.
Hi Fred. Not far from here is my favourite bit of commemoration in the centenary. A very spectacular mural in Hadley featuring 100 citizens as chosen by the people of Stoke, 100
yes.
taken from beside Wakefield.
I'm with you, yes.
I think so, that's up there. And including Fred Hughes of this parish. Fred, what's it like to look at that mural and see yourself on it with all those you just put over Ray Johnson, as I remember. And off the top of your head, is there anybody not on that mural who just missed it?
Are there any people not on it, you said?
Can you think of anybody who isn't on it?
I think the accomplishment of it has been absolutely spot on. I mean, of course, there's the odd person. I mean, there are people on there that people will look at and say, who is she? Who is he? Well, that's the nature of it all, and I think, forthcoming is our book, your book, on the characters, on who's who.
The story that runs beneath each of the 100 of the founding fathers is expanded now to be a bigger story of the centenary.
Well, I think we're waiting for that, and I think that's going to be the key to it. You'll look at that and you'll see, and then you can make your own mind up whether some people can. For me, I never expect to get accolades. It's nice to get accolades. It's nice to get praise. We all know that, but we don't look for it, do we? We just get on with our lives, and that's it. And I've always tried to be like that. So I don't look for that. That my presence is on that wall has been happily received. It has me dressed in a position where they tell me I'm introduced, and the book of history is there, and the pages are flying there. I think it's a nice position to be in, but I think the whole thing it's a great memento, and I hope it lasts for a long time, and I'm sure it will. I hope so anyway. So I don't know if that answers your question. I'm not going to pick out a name. Nobody guessing that I can see anyway. I think we're coming to the end now. Well, thank you so very much for coming. I really hope you like the book. Have I overstayed mine? Well, if I haven't, I'm glad.